Lights, camera, action.
Action. Okay, Dad, you've got the spotlight.
Okay.
Happy Father's Day.
Oh, thank you very much.
It's a very special day.
I know it is, especially for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I just wanted to just ask you a few questions about your life.
Oh, okay.
No?
It's been awful long, so I don't remember all of it.
Let's see, your birthday was when?
August 20, 1931,
And you were born in
Kansas, yeah.
what town?
Where?
What town?
Actually, it was called Hamilton, Kansas, but I think I was born on the farm,
Wow.
I believe.
Yeah. And you were the oldest of how many kids?
5.
How many kids in your family?
Oh, that's right. 3 girls and 1 boy,
Right.
and I was the boy.
So you were the oldest.
Yes.
How was that growing up with all those girls?
Well, I don't know. We seemed to make out okay. No problem really. I had a lot of things to do with boy things and walking in the woods, hunting, and playing ball. So I lived my own life away from the girls.
Yeah.
Excepting, I will say that I missed my first grade because we were moving so much. And I started one school, and I started another school, and finally I didn't finish. So finally the next year I started over again, and my sister Colleen, who was a year behind me, was in my class. So we were in the same class together all the rest through grade school and high school.
Did you enjoy that?
It didn't bother me. Actually, I think it bothered Colleen a little more because I remember Donna wrote something about our life there, and she says, every time we sit down for dinner, Pat would start talking about school and all this stuff, and he dominated the conversation, and Colleen sat back and never got a chance to get a word in.
Well, that was the joys of being the oldest, right?
Maybe, I guess so, yeah.
Why did your family move around so much?
But, we didn't own a place. Well, we did buy a place in Wenatchee, but my dad was always trying to find a different place to work, and so anyway, we decided to move out of Wenatchee up to Sunny Slope, and then we decided we'd like to go back towards Ellensburg area where they had first came when they came back from Kansas. And so we found a place at Lauderdale Lodge, which is where the highway turns off between Cle Elum and Ellensburg, and it was really a beautiful place. And that's where we both started school again, and we rode the bus, and it was a beautiful place. But pretty soon, Mom and Dad decided they'd rather move back to Wenatchee because we lived out in the country, and I mean, it was a little. We used to buy groceries by a guy that come in a truck, and we'd give him the grocery list, and 2 weeks later he'd come back with the groceries we ordered, and Mom would give him a new list. So we never did much hard shopping at town. I don't ever remember going in town shopping. So that's why they wanted to move back to Wenatchee. And Dad finally was getting involved in electrical work, but before he was married, he had really a nomadic life, doing different things, different jobs, and he loved the country here. So,
What kind of jobs did you do?
well, for one thing, he went to work in a hops in Yakima, hops, and then he worked in wheat fields, and then I remember one time he and a buddy decided they was not doing anything, let's try something different. So they bought a boat on the Columbia River, and they started a still, and that went on for a few months, and then they just sold that, and Dad decided to go to Seattle to find a job. Well, he didn't have much money to go on, so he hopped a freight train, and he went to Seattle on a freight train, and there were a couple of hobos in the same thing. Just before they got into Seattle, it was getting really cold over there, and these hobos started a fire in the train. So my dad got scared that he didn't want to get caught with this thing going on, so he jumped out of the train, and he found his way in Seattle, and he got a job working for some drug company delivering drugs to different drug stores and like wholesale delivery stuff. And he didn't really like that either. And he heard there was a job up in the Cascade Mountains. They were building a tunnel through the mountains, and they needed an electrician. Well, before he left Tennessee as a young guy, he worked for a relative and learned something about electricity. So he went up there and said he was an electrician, and they hired him. So he helped wire the whole Great Northern Tunnel until it was finished. He didn't do it. Of course, he was just one of the many workers there. And things really started to pan out for him, and that's when he decided to go to Spokane to work. And I remember him telling that him and his buddy, it was hot, and they was driving from Seattle to Spokane, and they stopped at a place called Alkali Ike, and it was up where just south of Quincy. And they stopped at this service station to get gas, and the guy said, "Where are you guys going?" He said, "Well, we're going to Spokane because we understand there's some jobs there." He said, "Why are you going to Spokane?" He said, "Right up here at Wenatchee, they got a lot of jobs." "At Wenatchee?" And so he said, "Okay." And the two of them went up to Wenatchee. Well, I didn't tell you the story, but my mother, who'd come from Kansas, also had wound up in Wenatchee. And they wound up both going to the same orchardist working, and that's how they met and got married. So that began their life here.
What
Yeah.
year was that?
That was about 1929. They got married at St. Joseph's Church in Wenatchee,
Nice.
and which was unusual because I don't know, my mom had been gone, and maybe in Kansas, a lot to church. And of course, Dad was not involved in any church really. He may have been going to a Methodist church as a kid, but I don't know if they were really active or not. So anyway, they got married in the church at St. Joe's. But then Dad said, "I would really like to go back to Tennessee, see my family, you know. It's a beautiful country back there." So Mom said, "Okay, let's go." So they up and left. The young couple were married, and they had no attachments, so it was easy to do. And Mom got back there in Tennessee, and she didn't like it. I don't know if it was the Southerners or she didn't know anybody, and she said, "I don't like it here." And she said, "I think we should try to go to Kansas." Well,
Any connection to Kansas?
well, that's because that's where she was raised, and that's where some of her family was still at.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so Dad's folks gave him a big jar of seeds. It was sorghum seeds. A sorghum is something like a syrup. You raise it, and so that was their gift to him. Maybe you can plant this stuff when you get to Kansas. So anyway, they went to Kansas in 1929-30. It was a big depression, and they lived on a farm, I guess, a little farm. Maybe Grandpa had let them use some of his farm. I don't remember. And there was hardly any way to make money, so Dad said, "I'm going to plant these seeds." And he raised these sorghum, and he said, "Now, there's a way you have to make juice out of this stuff." So they had to take the sorghums and crush them. And he said, "I got to figure out a way to do this." And they had a horse. So he built this round thing with a grinding thing on it, and he hooked the horse to it, and the horse would go round and round and round. That was the only power they had to do this, but it worked, and he got all this sorghum started to come out and put it in jars, and he'd go into town and sell it. And that's how they made enough money to buy food with. But it was so terrible living there, hot, dry, and no mountains. And Mom said, "I liked the Wenatchee because of all the mountains we had there." So they decided. And then I was born there, and then so was Colleen. But they decided they had a German Shepherd. We had a German Shepherd. It was a registered dog. And
Is that Jerry?
Jerry, his name was Jerry, and it was registered German Shepherd. So we all got in the car. I don't know what kind of a car they had. They packed whatever they could get in the car, and the four of us and Jerry, and headed out to the state of Washington. And they wound up in Ellensburg, and they lived in the park one night. But there had been an old friend of Dad's who he'd met in Ellensburg years before from Tennessee, and he contacted him, and he gave him some money to live on for a while. And anyway, from there on, that starts their history about living in Central Washington.
Now, You guys then lived in Shaston for many years, right?
Beg pardon?
You lived in Shaston for many, many years?
Yeah, after we'd been moving around, I went to schools. I started school here in Wenatchee, and went a few months, and then we moved to Sunny Slope, and I started school up there, and then they decided to move to near Cle Elum, and by the time we moved around, I never had finished, so I started Cle Elum again in Colleen, and then back to Leavenworth, because Grandpa, my mom's father, who had come here from Kansas, he was kind of an ornery guy. He was kind of rough, and but they told him that his sons, who all followed Mom here. She was the first one, and then her brothers all moved here, and Grandpa and Grandma was left in Kansas alone. So they had to try to convince him to come out here. So they said, "We found a wheat ranch for you." He's, "Oh, wheat. Now that sounds pretty good to him." So it was up on Sunny Slope, up on here. There was a wheat ranch up where all the big houses development is now, and it was just for a rental. So they had a house on it, and so he rented or leased that wheat ranch, and he worked there for a while, but finally he got to where he needed to get his age and everything, so they bought a place up out of Leavenworth. So anyway, when Mom and Dad went to move back to Wenatchee out of Cle Elum, he said, "I got enough room here, you could build a little house on my property." Well, politics entered the theme. My grandpa was outspoken Democrat, and he loved politics. And my dad wasn't into politics very much, but Eastern Tennessee was a very much Republican state, and he was always Republican. So they got in political arguments, and my dad said, "I don't want to talk about it." Well, Grandpa wouldn't leave it alone. And finally, Mom said, "We can't take this anymore. Let's get away from Grandpa." So they went shopping for a place in Wenatchee, and a realtor said, "We have some property in Shaston, and it's really cheap. It's 650 acres, and there's got timber, and there's got 2 irrigation canals go through it, and pasture, and it's an old house. It used to be a chicken house, but they've converted it to a home with a basement." So they bought it for practically nothing. So that's where we finally settled, and that's where I was raised from. I started school again in the 2nd grade, second grade through high school. Yeah.
So was it like a one-room schoolhouse, or?
Oh no! It was a big 2-story brick schoolhouse with a lot of rooms in it and a big gymnasium, and yeah, it was really nice. So we enjoyed that. And
So growing up, did you have chores that you had to do, or what was one of your first jobs that you did?
wait, say that again.
Did you have chores on the ranch that you had to do?
Well, yeah, we had a couple cows. My dad was an electrician, and he worked out. And I know my mom used to have to do all the milking. We had a couple cows, and she would do the milking. I would even help sometimes, but I loved Terry and the Pirates and some of those programs that come on the radio. So I'd get home from school, and I would sit there, and I'd have to listen to those programs. And poor Mom was up there working, and she wasn't too forceful, but I could always feel sorry for her because I should have been helping more, you know. But I was just a kid, and that was her problem. I guess that was my attitude. But in the wintertime, it really got bad because we had these cows, and we had to carry water to them in a bucket and a trough pumped it out for them because it's all the snow and ice. We had sometimes 2 or 3 feet of snow. It snowed so much more than we used to get now, and. But Mom was always up there milking cows, and Dad would when he was home, but sometimes he was working in Ephrata, and he would be renting a little motel down in Ephrata till a weekend. And number one of his letters I still have in my file that he wrote to Mom, how much he missed her and how much he wished he could come back for the weekend, but he said, "I just don't have enough money for gas this week, and I think it'd be better for me to just stay here, and I'll see you next week." And so anyway, one night I remember it was wintertime, and Dad had been working, I think in Ephrata or someplace, and he was riding to town commuting with a man from Leavenworth who was also an electrician, and they were staying together. And so they'd been coming home. They were coming home for the weekend. I guess his friend stopped in Wenatchee at a tavern, and they got drinking. And my dad was not a drinker. He didn't drink at all. But he got with his buddy. They got drinking, and he bought a bottle of wine or something. And Mom was worrying where they were. And it was kind of a moonlit night, a lot of snow, and we saw the car lights parting up the road, and stopped, let Dad off. Well, he had a long walk up through the neighbor's old thing, up the hill, and he kept falling down in the snow, and Mom goes, "What is wrong with Dad? He can't see the trail or something." And he kept falling down, and finally got close to our thing, and Mom said, "It looks like he's hiding something in the snow there." And he had this bottle. So he got home, and Mom was furious at him. And he said, "I got to go to bed." So he went to bed. "I got to get to sleep because they're going to pick me up in the morning to go to work." And so he went to bed, and Mom went and hid all his clothes. So the next morning he got up and he couldn't find his clothes. So she said, "Well, that's your fault. You shouldn't have got drunk," you know. And I don't remember exactly what happened, whether the guy waited for him or Mom finally gave him his clothes. But he learned his lesson, and that never happened again.